But the trouble is, purses wear out. Skin and hair, even when pampered with all the right treatments, age. The satisfaction promised by the ads is at best temporary. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm human. I have a body and senses, and I do find some satisfaction in physical time-based things. A good meal, a comfortable blanket, a good haircut, and more. These are all things that I enjoy. But I know that they are not permanent pleasures. The advertisers know it too. And so they turn up the volume, tweaking labels, revising logos, changing ads. It's their business to tell me that I'm not enough. They tell me that I'm worth it, but they're quick to jump in with suggestions about what I need to do in order to be enough. And that's just the messages that bombard us about our physical selves. When I put the word self-help into a book search in Amazon, I was flooded with over 60,000 titles. From Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, a classic, to one I'd not heard before, 14 Habits That Are Holding You Back from Happiness. The titles go on and on and on. Clearly, people, we all have a lot of work to do. And we all have work to do. We all always will. I sometimes imagine we're all walking around with small tattoos on us somewhere that read "under construction." But I also imagine that we all have a second tattoo, one that reads "perfect, just the way I am." I believe both of those seemingly contrary things. My first reaction is that striving for more and for better, that they both get in the way of contentment. I sometimes think that's a more modern issue, but after just a little bit of looking around, it seems it's not a modern issue. It's a human one. The Tao Te Ching, over 2,500 years ago, had this to say on the topic. There is no greater calamity than not knowing what is enough. No greater curse than covetousness, and no greater tragedy than discontentment. The worst of all faults is always wanting more. Contentment alone is enough. And we find a similar sentiment in the Christian text in Matthew 6. Can any of you add a single hour to the length of your life by worrying? And why do you worry about clothes? Consider the lilies in the field and how they grow. They don't work or spin yarn, but I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was clothed like one of them. Stop fussing, the ancient teacher said. What you have is enough. Wanting more won't make you better, won't make you look better, and it may very well erode your sense of peace. I think it's fair to say that's not a message I'm going to see plastered at them all anytime soon. Maybe humans have always needed to be reminded of the value of contentment. But I can't help but think that we with mass media and social media need the reminder more than earlier people may have. In fact, studies are beginning to show us that the seemingly steady diet of images many of us consume through Facebook, Instagram, advertisements, etc., can leave us feeling discontented. As with so many things, it's a balancing act. The connections and community that people enjoy via their phones or computers can and does have a positive effect at times. But the curated version of other people's lives we see can reinforce the idea that our lives are lacking, the opposite of contentment. In 2018, a Canadian internet use survey gave us some information about the negative impacts. Individuals aged 15 to 64 were asked about their use of websites and apps that allowed them to share and create their own content and to view and interact with the content of others. We learned that many people use these sites. 9 in 10 of those aged 15 to 34 do. 8 in 10 of those 35 to 49, and 6 in 10 of those who are 50 to 64. That's a lot of Canadians. The survey asked people about 6 possible impacts: lost sleep, difficult concentrating on tasks, reduction in physical activity, feelings of anxiety or depression, feeling envious of the lives of others, or frustration and anger. And in total, about 20% of the people who responded reported at least some of these. Perhaps most concerning is that the negative impacts were more pronounced in younger people. We value our well-being, yet many of us struggle to give it the attention it deserves. There are distractions and pursuits that are designed to make it more difficult to settle into ourselves and focus on things that might actually lead to higher levels of contentment. Excuse me. Greater Good magazine, published by the University of California at Berkeley, features science-based research on factors that promote compassion and well-being. Recently, they published an article by Daniel Cardaro, a PhD, highlighting some of his research. In 2014, he and his team traveled to a previously uncontacted village high in the Himalayas. The work there involved showing pictures of human faces expressing emotions. There was a long list of universal emotions, from shame to joy, from embarrassment, of pictures of those to see if they could be recognized by people who had no previous experience with the outside world. When the team showed villagers dozens of facial and vocal expressions, they found that people recognized most of them with high accuracy. But the response to contentment was different. People reacted differently to that one. When the team was working to translate the reactions, their guide and translator stopped. He said, "In our culture, this emotion is very special. It is the highest achievement of human well-being, and it is what the greatest enlightened masters have been telling us about for thousands of years." When asked for the translation of the word, the guide explained it was tricky and said, "The closest word is chakshe, which is a very deep and spiritual word that means the knowledge of enough." He continued, "It basically means that right here, right now, everything is perfect as it is, regardless of what is happening outside." I always find the root meanings of words interesting, but in this case, I found it more than a little mind-blowing. Contentment comes from Latin contentus, which means held together or intact or whole. Originally, contentus was used to describe containers, things like cups, buckets, and barrels. But later, the word evolved into something that could reflect onto a person, which describes one who feels enough, one who feels intact or whole. Contentment asks, how complete are you as a human being? Most human feelings require some external input that are based on reactions to and relationships with events outside of ourselves. But contentment, on the other hand, requires no external input and is sourced from within the container, instead of seeking external sources for happiness, which are always going to be out of our control. Contentment offers stability. If contentment is something we can aspire to, it's useful to know what it is or what it is not. But knowing it and recognizing it don't make it easily attainable. I think some of us are just lucky to have temperaments that make contentment more likely. The strong messages we receive make it hard to even understand contentment rather than happiness is the goal. Some of us, for reasons of brain chemistry or other circumstances, will find contentment very elusive. We spend a lot of time in our lives striving for more, striving for happiness. And I've known for quite a while now that happiness was fleeing. I don't know why I figured it out as early as I did. I think I was in about grade 6 or so. And I was walking home from school and I was looking at clouds and watching birds when the thought occurred to me that I should try to be content instead of trying to be happy. More than a few years have passed since that walk home from school, And I think I was right. And I've really come to appreciate that I had some very good teachers in this. My husband used to say that my grandma was like the Buddha, finding joy in the loons, even though she had recently been widowed. 60 years she'd been married, and the loons were still something that made her eyes light up. And knowing that stuffing envelopes for her church was worthwhile, even when she was too old to contribute in other ways. I was lucky to have her as an example, and I'm lucky to have her genes. We know that contentment and happiness are not the same things, but we often confuse them. Certainly, both can at times be elusive, but I do believe that contentment is what we should focus on. It is longer lasting and makes, I think, a greater contribution to our well-being. I also see evidence that it equips us to deal with the troubles of our life, the injustice and hurt that are ever present. There are things we can do, practices that we can cultivate that will move us in the direction of contentment. That feels worthwhile. Each of us must find the practices that work best for us. Mine may not appeal to you. They may not fit. The monthly Soul Matters package on contentment offers a few suggestions for practices. They are: want what you have. It's the basic practice of gratitude. Make a list of things that you're grateful for at the end of each day. And also, don't make comparisons. If we go through the day comparing our situation with another's, we come up short, feeling either second rate or deprived. The Baal Shem Tov, a great Jewish teacher, said, compare not yourself with anyone else, lest you spoil God's curriculum. The earlier Dr. Seuss story aside about being lucky, I think it's wise not to put ourselves on a scale with other people. And the Greater Good article that I mentioned earlier has other suggestions about how to foster a sense of contentment. It says we should practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is the cultivation of focused attention to the present moment, without judging your experiences to be good or bad. It is a well-studied practice for calming the body and the mind. It also says we should reevaluate our well-being contingencies. We all have them. When I have X dollars in the bank, I'll be happy. When I retire, I'll be able to do the things that I've always wanted to do, and I'll be happy. When my kids do X, then I'll know I've been successful as a parent. It's okay to have goals. In fact, we need to have goals. But if we don't evaluate and reevaluate them frequently, we may really find that we're actually telling ourselves that our well-being needs to wait. And finally, the Greater Good article says we should accept all emotions. This is tough, and most of us don't like it because we know that some of our emotions are not pleasant. But feelings come and feelings go. Knowing that is important because if we don't, we hold on to some and deny parts of our human experience. Feeling whole now, feeling complete, requires us to do so even when we're sad or embarrassed or anything else. This radical appreciation of life's experiences is a cornerstone to contentment. Because if we can do that, if we can accept our feelings, we're reminding ourselves that our human experience as it exists is enough. I encourage you at the start of your theme month on contentment to play around with these practices, to try a few and focus on those that seem to fit you the best. For me, the clue is found in that long ago walk home from school, watching clouds, observing the birds. I've learned that when I'm feeling a little out of control or a little angsty, that imagining a small lake or watching the silhouette of branches against the sky is enough to ground me, to help me bring all the spinning bits back under control and to feel contained again, to feel content. There's a Wendell Berry poem that I'll close with that really rings true for me. Berry wrote, "When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be. I go down and lie where the wood drake rests in its beauty on the water, and where the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For time, I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free. We're going to have our closing song now, number 21 in the hymnal, should you have one in front of you, For the Beauty of the Earth. Thank you.